I am Darius, this is Sugarless Crystals, your sugar-free destination of YouTube, and you are here actually to my keto baking school tips. Over the years, I've been known for my desserts, my dessert recipes, and not my dessert recipes, but my dessert reviews. So I've gotten pretty good when it comes to the keto baking thing. And I'm gonna start a series to show you guys exactly how to make things better. Which brings us to the intro of your 5 ways to better keto sweets. I've noticed some people actually want to make their own, and in the beginning it's hard and it's easy to struggle with it. So therefore I'm going to be your keto baking guide. Or keto baking guide, which one you want me to be? It's your choice. First one's easy, over baking and quick baking. These are something that you definitely want to avoid. Now over baking it's easy. That happens in your regular desserts as well. If you just forget to leave the cake in there too long or leave the cookies in there too long, they can come out to be a little hard and dry. Well, with keto desserts, it's a lot easier to do because some things, especially if you're using something like coconut flour, depending on if your batter is already thick, sometimes you can put a toothpick in there when you first start and it comes out clean. So how do you figure it out? It's hard to say. With experience, you'll know. But a good way to start is simply put it in and then look for the edges to brown. Because if it's already a super thick batter like coconut flour, mainly what you want to do is just make sure that the egg cooks. If the egg cooks, it's going to be done. But if the egg finishes and you start to over bake, then you end up with something super dry, and coconut flour is already dry in itself. Overheating is something you want to avoid because then you could cook your desserts a little too fast. You don't want to do that because when you're dealing with these flours, whether it's almond flour or coconut flour, they rise differently and they bake differently than traditional flour. You want to actually cook them low and slow, kind of like a brisket or something like that. They tend to work better, and it gives the flours time to rise. Coconut flour will rise, but you need to give it a chance to. Almond flour will rise, but you need to give it a chance to. Almond flour will just rise a little faster than coconut flour. And with the rise, it'll also produce something less dense, something more fluffier, and something more moist in the process. And number 2, not knowing oven temperatures. A quick tip that I do is knowing your oven temperature. This is very important. Like, I don't even know how to put it. For you to really be like a baker, like, you have to know how your oven works. And a quick way to do it, I'll actually link one in the description box below, is having an oven or having a rack style thermometer. So that way you can, let's say, put your oven on 350 and see where it fluctuates to, if it actually reaches 350 or not, or if it goes way past it. For example, my oven, if I put it at 350, it rises all the way up to about 385, 390. I know. So when I want to bake a dessert at 350 degrees, I'll normally put it at about 300, so it'll rise to about 340, 335, and then when it falls around the 275 range, because of course the oven still thinks it needs to go below 300 degrees before it turns back up. That's why most of my desserts are always at 300 degrees, because to be honest, it'll hover around about 295 on average between the going up and coming back down, because by the time you preheat it, when I put it back in there, it's normally around 300 degrees then. So if you're serious about keto baking, this is something that you must know. You always see everybody say oven temperatures varies. Yeah, you should know. Yeah. Number 3, room temperature ingredients. Now, some people think it's not important to have room temperature ingredients, and it's hard to say. It varies from dessert to dessert. I'm not gonna lie to you. It does vary from dessert to dessert. So it matters on what you plan on cooking. If you're cooking anything sort of a cake style, bread style, cookie style, I would definitely highly recommend room temperature ingredients, especially if you're using coconut flour. This will make it so that way you can pump more air into the flour itself to produce a better rise and produce a more moist end result. Because if you use cold ingredients, the flours they like to clump up, and this is whether you use almond or if you use coconut. Coconut's the worst, of course, when it comes to clumping. And I actually speak on that in my coconut 101 video. And I actually speak on that in my coconut flour 101 video that I'll actually link in the description box below and in the card as well for you guys. Which takes me to my next topic, number 4, heat and air. So you hear a lot of people say almond flour, after you bring it out of the oven, allow it to sit, allow it to rest. This is very important because almond flour, for some reason, it like when it's still like super hot out the oven, it's just I mean, if you try to pick it up, it'll just crumble. But if you let it sit there, it'll come back together. I guess I don't know, the grains, they come back together, and now you can pick it up. Even when it comes to cakes or so, what'll happen is they'll reach an al dente point, and then all of a sudden, boom, they go like super dry. Especially coconut flour. Jesus Christ, that's what coconut flour is to be respected. Like it's a beast on its own. So heat and air tend to be your best friend here and your worst enemy. When I say air, I mean leaving it out. You may want to get yourself a cake saver, and if you don't have one like myself, you just kind of have to rough it out and deal with it. But what also helps out is, especially when you're dealing with the cakes after they've dried out, not putting, let's say, the icing on top of it and sticking it in, let's say, the microwave for maybe 10 or 15 seconds to kind of help it up and give it that moisture factor back into it. Or maybe you could just simply take it out the refrigerator and leave it out for maybe an hour or so. It might not even take an hour. Just, 30 minutes, enough time for it to warm itself back up. But I would leave it wrapped in something. If you have it in, let's say, a plastic bag or aluminum foil, something that keeps the air away from it, because if not, then it'll be better off for you to stick it in the microwave. And number 5, understanding your sweeteners. This is actually, this entire time I'm talking about keto sweets, and this is the first time I've actually mentioned an ingredient in itself of being a factor, because all these other things, they do add up. They're more important than you think, because if you miss these steps, then your final result is going to be much different. I play all these factors into it. It's sort of like if you go to McDonald's and they cook your fries at 500 degrees. But guess what? Your fries are going to be super crispy on the outside. They're probably not going to be done on the inside, and they're just not going to be very good. All of these things matter, especially, like I said, when you're baking. But understanding sweeteners. So what do I mean by this? Alright, so the first thing you need to understand is that when you're dealing with keto sweeteners, they don't caramelize. Bear with me because I struggle with this word. That's one of the first things you want to note. They don't caramelize, and secondly, if used in too much of a volume, they will leave an aftertaste. And that goes regardless of liquid, granulated, it doesn't matter. They all have some sort of an aftertaste. Now, I've been told allulose doesn't have an aftertaste, which is almost kind of, I don't really like that, because think about it, like, so I can just pour 2 cups of allulose inside of something and that's fine. Some of these sweeteners do affect your intestines. Like for me, for instance, I can't do xylitol. Like xylitol, it just causes problems for me. So for it not to have an aftertaste and someone has stuck 2 cups in it for a beginner, oh man, that's an accident waiting to happen. I promise you. Erythritol will do the same thing. Some of these things are sugar alcohols, meaning the whole idea of the sweeteners is your body doesn't process them like sugar. They actually kind of flow through your body just like fiber does, and that can be very dangerous. Not in the sense of killing you, but in the sense of if you're out and you're trying to have a good time and then all of a sudden your stomach is hurting. That could really mess your day up. Now, to bring a sweetness, your best bet, just like with the flours, almond and coconut flour mix always produces like the best texture I've seen so far. And I don't care what type of baked dessert it is. It's phenomenal. It's not perfect hand to hand, but it's pretty close. So when it comes to sweeteners, mixing them creates the best result as well. So let's say stevia. Stevia brings such a strong sweetness because I can't remember how many times it's sweeter than sugar, but it's a lot. Like that's why you can't put it in your tongue, because it's super concentrated. Just a little bit of stevia can really boost the sweetness level up. But let's say that's all you use is stevia. Well, to get the desired level sweetness is not gonna be, you may not be able to put a small amount in there. So what I use stevia as for is a top level sweetness. And then I use my granulated sweetener to help with my bulking level and to help with my base level sweetness when it comes to my baked dessert. Now, for the people that don't use stevia, if you just use the granulated sweetener or the powdered sweetener inside of your dessert and you don't use the stevia on top of it, that won't change the texture at all. But taking the granulated sweetener out will change the texture. But if you don't use the stevia, if you just taste it like that, it may be a little sweet to not sweet at all. And I mean, that's up to you if that's the route you want to go. because you've tried stevia by itself and you feel like it's bitter and you don't want to take a chance on it. Trust me, I understand, but I do ask that you give it a chance. If for someone who does understand how to use them. I want to throw a little bonus thing out there. One sweetener that I have noticed that regardless of how much I use it, it gives a sort of aftertaste is golden monk fruit. And that is this one right here by Lakanto, golden monk fruit. I don't know, it's so odd. Regardless of how much I use it, there's always this funny taste into it. I don't really get it. Whatever they use to give it that, I guess, that brown sugar flavor feel, it leaves an aftertaste. And that's why I don't use it in everything. More than likely, if I'm trying to get like a brown sugar flavor, I like to use some sort of a sweetener with maple syrup or molasses, blackstrap to be exact. Blackstrap does carry more carbs, but used in small amounts, it'll get the job done. And 1 tablespoon that is about 12 or 13 grams of carbohydrates, I might use a half a tablespoon just to get the job done. And that's in an overall dessert. So that 6 grams is not really gonna hurt you much. And it's gonna bring an excellent flavor to your dessert or your keto sweet. That'll wrap it up. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. We have more baking tips soon to come. Actually, a lot coming. I got a lot to talk about. A lot to talk about. I am Darius. This is Sugarless Crystals, your sugar-free destination of YouTube. And I will see you next time.